Welcome, everyone, to the 2023 Leading Transformational Change Forum. My name is Jenny Rose, and I'm a leadership coach, a proud member of the Consortium for Change, and a friend and colleague of Michele Stowe. It is my great pleasure to welcome and introduce her to you today. Michele has been for more than 25 years built a career around her passion, which is leadership development. Her career in executive human resources began in Fortune 100 companies in industries ranging from real estate to pharmaceuticals. Michele pivoted into the nonprofit space when she stepped into a leadership role at Mercy Housing, which is one of the nation's largest affordable housing organizations. There, she served as Chief Administrative Officer and Chief Operating Officer for 12 years and managed 140 employees in areas ranging from strategic planning to philanthropy, human resources, information technology, and marketing. Through her executive coaching and consulting company, SkyRocket LLC, Michele helps nonprofit teams, leaders, and organizations create and experience authentic change that empowers them to produce significant and sustainable professional results. And now I'm going to pass it over to Michele so that we can dive right into how to lead change in a purpose-driven organization.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for that warm introduction. I am delighted to be speaking to you all today about leading change in a purpose-driven organization. So let's set the context for what it means to lead in a purpose-driven organization. It does not mean that the work is any less complex. The end is not about generating shareholder value, but we still need to run a financially sustainable organization. We still need to ensure that our business is sustainable, that we're planning for the future, all with limited resources, passionate, committed employees, and complex community dynamics. My days as a chief operating officer of a large national nonprofit organization looked a little like this. So, start the day presenting with my peers to investors and donors. Attend a mid-morning community meeting. You need to ensure you're grounded with the community in humility, openness, and flexibility. Grab some coffee and meet a direct report to work over lunch, discussing the staffing shortage, need for funding, and near burnout of the team. Carefully manage a mid-afternoon call with a board member who's wondering why their input wasn't included in the discussion in the last board call. Rush through dinner so you can jump on an evening call about a project that's about to hit a roadblock, and then fall asleep after scanning emails and texts missed during the day. Commit to tomorrow being different. And I would wake up in the morning wondering, how on earth can I sustain this? I love this mission, the purpose and the work. I wouldn't change that for the world. But how do I know I'm being successful? How do I lead change in this sort of an organization when I and my teams can barely catch our breath? How do I reconnect with the passion and joy that I felt when I started working in this field in the first place? So I decided to survey and interview 100 C-suite nonprofit leaders who had successfully been in their roles for over 5 years. Leaders across the country in nonprofit organizations focused on such diverse community needs as healthcare, housing, climate change, food insecurity, and education. I wanted to know what they did every day, behaviors big and small, to keep their eye on the organization's strategy and lead change in their purpose-driven organizations. I asked them each this question: what one behavior or skill has helped you the most to be successful in your job? The pattern that emerged was loud and clear. They had each found ways to continue to love their work by demonstrating a clear pattern of 3 behaviors. From these interviews, I've created the Listen, Lead, and Love Your Work framework for leaders of purpose-driven organizations. The 3 behaviors that emerged from this survey were listen deeply and stay curious, role model self-care, create and cultivate diverse partnerships. Seems easy, no problem, right? So let's break each of these down individually. First, to listen deeply and stay curious. means that you create opportunities to really listen to your team. And with each opportunity to connect with an employee, it is critical that you're actively engaged, listening thoughtfully and staying curious, asking questions. This is not the time to give advice, as author Michael Stanier so nicely coined. This is the time to tame the advice monster, to stay in a curious posture and keep asking questions. It's your time to learn from them and their challenges and test your own assumptions. Each meeting is an opportunity to learn from your employees and check on the reality of your strategy, the engagement of your employees, the stickiness of that change effort that you've just rolled out. Only then should you decide what your course of action will be. When we are moving through change in an organization, we need to know if we've asked all the questions needed to really understand the challenge. And who owns this challenge? As leaders, we need to be fully aware of the impact of our mere presence on the dynamic in the room. So we need to be thoughtful about when and how we step in and what action is truly supportive of our employees. Christopher Reed, former president of the Mercy Housing Management Group, explained the importance of making time to listen. I see myself as the least important in that room. So when it comes to transformational change, we have to start by listening and have the humility to realize we are now the least important person in that room. So let me share an example from my work at Mercy Housing. We were in the process of acquiring a smaller nonprofit that was restructuring their organization and divesting their real estate portfolio. Before we did anything, we started by listening at every level to all the concerns of the employees that were impacted. What opportunities did they see for the future? What hopes did they have? What did they want to ensure we didn't miss or lose in the process of acquiring these properties and the teams that worked in the community every day? Only then did we start to build a plan for integration and with the full participation of that acquired organization. They had, after all, built housing and programming for communities in need and did a great job of it. We learned that deep passion for the community that they were serving, the history of their founding, and frequent employee engagement were critical elements of their culture. And with that feedback from the employees, we made certain that we demonstrated respect for the organization, its culture, communities, and employees every step of the way. It ensured that we had a smooth transition for the organization, its finances, and its people. The second behavior that emerges as a theme from these leaders is the importance of role modeling self-care. The old oxygen mask adage applies here. The air is getting thin, it's hard to breathe. You feel lightheaded from the stress and lack of oxygen, and then it hits you. The survival of the organization depends on you taking care of yourself first. If you are unable to breathe and think clearly, then your team and organizational results will also sputter out. So we make sure that we can breathe and then begin the process of strategizing a change effort. In that process, we are also beginning the emotional journey through the change we're implementing. For months, we put the strategy together, build the timelines, align resources, gain support. And so months later, our employees are just getting started on that same emotional journey. While we are ready to implement, move on to the next thing, they're still learning. So we need to be aware of where we are emotionally in the cycle of change and be open to the idea that not everyone's in the same place. But it starts with us as leaders. We cast a shadow about what it means to take care of ourselves. And this is an everyday behavior. Employees can see how much or how little we value self-care. How do we show up to work? Is it after dropping the kids off at school and we have a nice cup of coffee? Or frazzled and feeling overwhelmed? How do we leave work? We wrap up our day thoughtfully, say our goodbyes, or rush out the door and ghost a few people on the way? How do we take care of our own needs? Are we taking meditation breaks? Or are we running chronically late from one meeting to the next? We have more control over this than we think. And it's up to us to set healthy boundaries. All of this sets the tone for the culture on your team. Your employees now see clearly that you too expect them to either prioritize their own health or sacrifice their health for the goals of the organization and the organizational change. So it starts with really understanding yourself. What are the things you do really well? What are your derailers? What are your stress behaviors? And how good are you at noticing and managing your stress reactions? Your self-awareness sets the stage for you to allow yourself to be human, flawed, vulnerable, and gives permission for your team to do the same. The pursuit of perfection haunts many of us, and making mistakes and learning from them is the heart of maintaining a growth mindset. By making mistakes and learning from them, talking about them, we can create a learning organization around us, where our teams take calculated risks, innovate, and learn together through change. And lastly, we need to take care of ourselves. In ways big and small, we need to ensure that we take the time for things that are truly restorative for us. If we're to lead the change, we need to take care of ourselves to be in this for the full marathon. As 2020 wore on, with the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd, societal reckoning of racial injustices, fear of the unknown for the future of our employees and residents, I was seriously burned out. I reached out to my own executive coach and I asked her what she thought about a silent retreat. After all, as an executive and single mom, it seemed really attractive to just hide somewhere silent for a few days. My coach wisely asked me if I thought that would be truly restorative for me. I do tend to go pretty fast in life, and I don't do quiet well. Michele, she said, you move like a jet plane, constantly in motion and at supersonic speeds. A silent retreat is like a wall, unmoving, steady, and solid. And in this case, the jet plane doesn't win, and the wall doesn't win either. Let's think of something else. Brilliant words. And after some soul searching, I realized that time spent moving myself through nature in hiking boots and for days at a time with my family is truly the most restorative thing I can do. I returned from those outdoor excursions ready to take on the next change effort and keep the organization moving forward, grounded and calm. Here's a quote from Jane Graff that I deeply appreciate. Most of your time is spent working. So if you're not having fun, what's the point? Right on. So when you take the time to role model self-care with these steps, it also creates an environment for you and your team where you can reconnect with your purpose, passion, fun, and joy for the work. The third behavior cited by the leaders I interviewed is to create and cultivate diverse partnerships. When we look at the change that most purpose-driven organizations are asked to lead, they are persistent challenges in our communities that are deep-rooted and resistant to change. We cannot do this alone, and we cannot be successful overnight. And we find that not long after we're established in a community and starting to do good work, we're often approached by additional communities or organizations asking us to help and do more. Maybe they ask from our communities to do bigger things than our organization can handle alone. Maybe the change is in a geography that we're not in, or maybe a service area that's unfamiliar to us, or offering services to communities that we haven't served in the past. There's a pressure to say yes to every request or idea that comes from our board or our communities. And truly, many of us are hardwired to never say no. Having partnerships in place allows us to say, you are right, that is a need, and I have the perfect partner in mind. So what do I need to think about relative to partnerships to support our work and have a greater impact in our communities? We need to assess what partnerships we already have in place, which of those partnerships are effective, and who is missing. We need to consider the triple bottom line with these partnerships. Elizabeth Prutch, the Chief Impact Officer of the Colorado Nonprofit Association, said it really well in my conversation with her. We need to find the win-win-win here. She meant a win for your organization, a win for the partner, and a win for the community and people you're serving. Creating more and thoughtful partnerships is one way to ensure you aren't overcommitting your organization to work that's unfunded or not within the mission or core competency of your team. A powerful example of the impact of partnerships at a purpose-driven organization is the work that Patagonia has done to create high-quality outdoor jackets made from trash bags. Patagonia, you may know, has a very rigorous design principle when it comes to sustainability. The company has said publicly that the Earth is the only shareholder, and it has created the Patagonia Purpose Trust, which is designed to ensure that the company's leaders stay focused on making decisions that will benefit the planet. In practice, this means that the organization is always working to find materials that have a small environmental footprint and ideally don't require extracting raw materials from the earth. So to do this, Patagonia partnered with Bionic, which was founded in 2009. Bionic works on coastlines across Central America and Asia where there's a lot of plastic that washes up on the shore. It hires local communities to help collect these bottles. Then it brings these heaps of plastic to its recovery and sorting facility in Costa Rica. It then transforms the materials into yarn. They've had the ability to influence their existing partners also, like Gore-Tex. Gore-Tex have used toxic chemicals in the laminates of outerwear to make them water repellent. Patagonia has been nudging Gore-Tex to test and prototype alternative chemistries that don't include these toxic chemicals. Now, Gore-Tex has developed a new membrane which is free of these chemicals but still performs just as well. So in this example, Patagonia has created long-term partnerships with both Bionic and an established partner, Gore-Tex, that they hope will help them scale their operations so that other brands on the market will be able to use materials made from marine plastic. By engaging with a long-standing partner in their own purpose, Patagonia is making real sustainable infrastructure change for waste management, employment for people in coastal communities, and generating their own shareholder value. That sure feels like a win-win-win. So in summary, these wise words came from leaders who were generous enough to share their own leadership journeys with us. And none of them said it was easy. But with these behaviors top of mind, we can create satisfying work, leading transformational change in organizations that are deeply rooted in purpose, whether they be for or nonprofit. And along the way, we can rekindle our own joy for our work and inspire our teams to do the same. Thank you for joining me today to talk about how we can drive change in purpose-driven organizations, to listen, lead, and love our work. Thank you. So Jenny, I'm going to turn it over to you and see if we have any questions from the chat.
Michele, thank you so much. It was really helpful to hear about your research and your experience, and we so appreciate you sharing it with us. Participants, you can feel free to put your questions into the Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as possible. I want to start with something that is on my mind. Michele, I'm looking at these 3 behaviors: listen deeply and stay curious, role model self-care, create and cultivate diverse partnerships. And let's be honest, I have work to do in all of these areas. Probably a lot of us do. Where do you recommend beginning?
Oh, it's such a great question, right? Because it can seem overwhelming on any day to try and tackle all of these. You know, I would say fully that it begins with role modeling self-care, truly. You know, as we think about how we show up as leaders, the oxygen mask example that I used in my presentation is so important, but it also takes some of the deepest digging, and it takes time for us to really get to know ourselves, understand how we show up, and understand how we can best take care of others. role modeling that self-care is critical for the shadow that we cast. And so when I then think about listening, when I think about creating partnerships, the better I know myself, the better I'll be at listening and really hearing. And also the better I'll be as a partner for my organization to really determine how do we partner best with an external partnership with any other kind of organization.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I want to get to, there's several questions in the chat. Let me get to one that really resonates here. So the question is, how can we say no in meetings? What is the best approach to do that?
I love this question. I was a chronic yes. I absolutely cannot stand saying the word no. And it's interesting. I had this role modeled for me by other leaders, and that has made all the difference. And I have to say, some of the best examples of saying no that I've heard has been by saying yes and, right? Improv rules apply here. Yes, and that's a great idea. Let me get back to you later. Yes, and that's an interesting proposal. Perhaps we can look at some partners to do this work. Yes, and not today, maybe tomorrow. And so as a leader, I felt better acknowledging and validating whatever the request was. 9 times out of 10, the request was right on point. I just didn't have the energy or the bandwidth or the budget to do it. So acknowledging the request and offering an alternative for how it might be solved, I've found is honestly the best way for me personally.
Yeah.
And I've seen be really successful for others to say no.
Yeah, I love that. Improv rules. Another question. This is really interesting. I'm curious to know your experience with this. So Patrick has asked, you spoke with 100 leaders in nonprofits, and he wants to know, do you see different behaviors in the for-profit sector relative to nonprofit?
What a great question. And we'll need fully another 30 minutes to unpack that. But Patrick, thank you for the question. I do see one consequential difference that I see is there's an expectation when you join a nonprofit that you are connected to the purpose. And so, for example, when I've conducted Gallup surveys at various nonprofit organizations, the engagement scores are all very, very high in the 90s. A for-profit organization would cut off its left arm to have engagement scores like that. But the challenge is when we're all this engaged, other bad behaviors can show up, such as impatience with someone else, perhaps a judgment, let's say, between departments, accounting and program services, disagreeing about how fast checks are cut. Well, now it comes down to, do you believe in the purpose as much as I do? Do you support the mission as much as I do? So it gets emotionally hot pretty quickly. And that was one of the fundamental differences that I saw in the cultures generally in non and for-profit, where in for-profit, there was definitely a sense of, if I'm just really unhappy here, I'll just go. In nonprofit, if I'm really unhappy, but I'm very connected to the mission, I'm going to stay. So there was just an interesting dynamic there about the level of engagement and then behaviors that show up. And as leaders, managing that high emotional engagement, that can be challenging and exhausting at times.
Yeah. That resonates. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So if anybody else wants to add their question in the Q&A, now is the opportunity. Here is another one, and this is about the partnerships. So partnerships are tricky, and it's not always easy to find a good match and to vet the relationship. How do you ensure that you have a suitable partner?
Great question, right? And oftentimes when organizations are looking at a merger or an acquisition, they do a ton of due diligence, right? About the financials of the organization, the customer, the market niche. Is this a worthwhile investment, and culture, which should be done up front all the same, but that assessment is done. I would posit that same level of diligence needs to be used also for vetting potential partners. If I am showing up in a space with someone, and so it's my organization and, right? So Patagonia and Bionic, Patagonia and Gore-Tex, If there are ands, there must also be a clear alignment of mission, of culture, and of purpose to make sure that when things get hard in the partnership, which they will, the partnership will be tested. It won't always be sunshine and roses. That we come from a similar enough culture and communication style that we can work through those challenges and continue the aspirational goals of that partnership. So deep vetting really is the short answer there for partnerships. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just kind of breaking it down was really, really helpful. I think we have time for one last question. And I'm going to go with, let's see, there is this one. How do you coach the strong communicative leader to talk less and listen more?
Oh, goodness. I would love for that question to begin another session. I think that self-awareness is really important. And so for coaching, I do rely with my clients on the power of 360 feedback, assessment tools, anything that helps someone see themselves more clearly, to understand when you're very talkative, you're taking the space up in the room and preventing others from having a moment to share their voice and shine. And so for me, the question really is, what is your intention and purpose in all that talking? And what would it mean to talk less? One quick coaching tactic, which many of us, I'm sure, have tried with our clients, which is when someone has said something, count to 3 quietly in your head. Don't be the first one to say anything. And see what happens. Notice the sort of magic that happens in the room when you're not the only one talking. But that's a tricky one. That is a tricky one and a great question. Thank you.
Those are some great tips. Michele, thank you so much for sharing with us. We've gotten a bunch of questions to have your QR code put back up on the screen. If that's something that we can do before we close the session, that would be great. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you enjoy the rest of the forum, and we look forward to learning with you for the next few days here.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you, Stelios. Thank you, everyone.